This podcast is brought to you by Deepbridge Capital LLP. Deepbridge is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Please note that investments discussed are both illiquid and high risk and won't be suitable for all investors and should be considered as part of a diversified portfolio. The content of this podcast should not be construed as financial or taxation advice. We recommend investors seek appropriate professional financial advice. Any views expressed may no longer be current and may have already been acted upon. Welcome to this latest Deepbridge Discovery Podcast. My name is Andrew Aldridge. The purpose of this podcast is to bring to life the people and the companies behind what Deepbridge does. To that end, I'm delighted today to be joined by Neciah Dorh, who's Chief Executive Officer and founder of FluoretiQ, a medtech company based in Bristol. So, Neciah, great to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So with these things, we always like to start at the beginning. So can you just tell us a bit about how FluoretiQ came to be, your key objectives as a business?
All right. So we're a Bristol-based medtech startup, and we're tackling the challenge of using antibiotics responsibly, and that has long and far-reaching implications for each and every one of us across the planet. We really started off, this journey back in 2017. I was a researcher at the University of Bristol looking into detection of pathogens actually as well. But what really impacted me was my daughter was born that same year actually, and she had a real brush with her health. So her delivery was quite challenging, and her physicians had questions about possible infection, and it took several days to work out what was going on. And in the meantime, they were just really struggling to get the antibiotics in intravenously.
Yeah.
And it really highlighted in my head the scale and the implications related to actually being able to know what's going on with the patient in front of you before starting treatment.
Yeah.
I mean, thankfully she was fine in the end, but I know that that's not the case for every child. And so that really lit a fire under us so a lot to persevere with developing an entirely new way of finding bacteria and being able to determine what the right treatment should be within minutes rather than days. So it started off with myself and co-founders, Josephine and Martin Cran, and we've since built up an interdisciplinary team to harness advances in glycan chemistry and in microbiology and machine learning, which allows us now to detect and identify bacteria in 15 minutes, but also determine what the right antibiotic should be within 30 minutes or less.
Wow, which I guess takes away, previously it'd be blood tests and taken away to a lab and probably days, if not weeks, to do research.
Yeah, depending on where you are, it could be over a week to get that result. So you're moving really from days down to minutes, and that's where the technology is most impactful, being able to get the treatment right the first time around.
Fantastic. So can you tell us a bit about your background? Obviously, you've alluded to kind of the studies you were doing, etc., but you and the team, kind of where have you come from? What's your background?
So my background was in biosensor research. So I did a PhD in electrical and electronic engineering. Cool. My co-founders are similar specialties. We were all pretty much based in electronic engineering, and dabbled in the dark side of life sciences.
And that was kind of where you saw the path going, I guess, then.
Indeed. Fun fact is I actually got into med school and dropped out to do engineering, so I somehow circled back into this area.
It was always meant to be, obviously. That's what it was.
Always meant to be.
Very good. So what have FluoretiQ's key milestones been so far?
So we actually started from scratch, and thankfully Deepbridge has been a part of this journey from very early on. We started from defining the assay, and to date we've actually, and when I say assay, I mean the actual technology, the protocol, the test itself. It started as an idea back in 2017, and since then we've not just proven it, we've patented it. The patents are currently in national phase. We've had it peer reviewed and published back in 2022, and when it comes to the product itself, I'm really pleased to say we've made several units to date.
Excellent.
We've designed it, built it, and currently testing it with help from regional NHS trusts. So we're testing against the first application, which is urinary tract infections.
That must have been thrilling almost to have that first tangible product in your hand when it first kind of got produced.
I must say, Andrew, I almost shed a tear when I saw it the first time.
not quite the same as birthing your child, but
No.
almost on that level, I guess.
No, yeah, almost on that level. After you see, what was initially a concept in your head come to life, and to see it being used, by scientists, it is quite a feeling.
So who's your ultimate client then? Would you be selling these the product to?
Primarily healthcare providers, both public and private. There's a real need around being able to treat infections, efficiently, and by that I mean getting the treatment right the first time round. So we're talking hospitals, GPs, potentially pharmacies and community diagnostic centers, but that depends on how care pathways develop over the next few years.
Excellent. And I think the world of antimicrobial resistance, the World Health Organization have stated that it's probably the biggest health challenge of the 21st century. Can you just tell us a bit more about that, about why that it's such a big challenge, and ultimately kind of what that means for you guys, I guess?
So actually antibiotics, so let's just start from the start. So antimicrobial resistance is basically a phenomenon where the microbes, the bacteria or fungi that you're trying to treat with the antibiotics have developed a mechanism to actually survive the treatment. So they become resistant to that treatment. And that has existed for almost as long as we've known antibiotics. So I think within a year of Fleming discovering penicillin, we saw the first, hints of resistance. Now, the reason it's such a challenge is because antibiotics underpin most of modern medicine. You could not go for chemotherapy successfully. You could not get moderate and major surgeries done successfully and even survive cuts and scrapes without antibiotics. They're so important to us, and on average, they add about 20 years to our lifespan.
Okay, wow.
So the fact that we're seeing many of our important drugs becoming less effective due to misuse, and not just misuse, but misuse contributes to it significantly, then that is a real concern, because we could find ourselves back to pre-antibiotic era where people had a much shorter lifespan and were dying from cuts and scrapes. Now, one of the key challenges for that has existed is, how does the clinician know that this is the right drug to give to this patient sitting in front of me when the process takes days and they've got perhaps half an hour, sometimes less nowadays, to make that decision. So we as technology developers, we have a real role to play in safeguarding the existing antibiotics and even the new ones that are being developed by creating, in our case, we're creating fast and accurate point of care tests to help diagnose the infection, but also guide antibiotic treatment using evidence. And that's the most important part. It's done today mostly on clinical judgment and whatever tests are available. But the key need is having that concrete evidence that would take days to develop in the lab, but available within that window of a consultation.
And I guess that's a change in healthcare provision in general, that moving away from one sole clinician or GP's kind of thoughts or bias, if you like, and moving to fact-based medicine. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think they've always had to act on it, but it's genuinely the direction that medicine is going in, more personalized, more data-driven, and that's all beneficial. And the plug I was just going to put in, because I've got two brothers who are doctors, and they would knock me over the head if I blamed them for the way treatment is done today. But genuinely, there weren't the tests available.
Of course there wasn't. No, absolutely.
To get to make those decisions before. So now there's a real opportunity to treat patients with based on data, rather than having to use sort of a mixture of symptomatic assessment and clinical judgment.
Absolutely. I mean, it's little things like, historically, I've been treated by a doctor for giving painkillers, and I was given codeine, which it turns out I'm allergic to. So, actually, they've got a choice of various different types of painkillers, but they chose the one that I was allergic to, which makes symptoms worse. And that's only a very minor example of that kind of that fact-based advice, which I guess is across the board.
Yeah, I think it's just highlights a real opportunity to use advances in technology, because much of what we're able to achieve with our NANOPLEX platform and the Sci-Fi one as well is driven by advances in machine learning, for example, that we could harness to pick up small patterns that we could not before.
Yeah, and it's that processing of data and the speed of being able to process that, I guess, these days.
That's correct.
So I guess, you've come a long way in the last kind of 5 years or so since you kind of started out, etc. But I guess, for any entrepreneur, any kind of founder of a business, it's not all plain sailing. What challenges, what barriers have you faced along the way, and how's that played out?
I think for our sector, the challenges are generally quite similar across the board. It's going to be regulations, understanding what are the rules of designing and developing this type of technology. There's the complexity. I mean, they're bacteria, they're quite small, but at the same time, they are still very complex things, and they don't always behave the way that you expect them to. And so being able to quickly iterate and quickly lack of a better term, diagnose what's going on is quite has been one of the challenges. And of course, capital. I would say it's an area of high need. I mean, but at the same time, it's still a very competitive market, especially now. You know better than I do that the funding landscape has changed significantly, and so raising capital to back ideas, particularly at the early stages, is always quite challenging.
Yeah, the last 12 to 18 months in particular have seen that kind of squeeze on capital, kind of from seed stage up to large private equity cash, and I think that's seen across the board. But making sure that you've got that right funding partner and working to get that capital is essential, I guess, for you. That's interesting. And kind of you're based down in Bristol, as you said, so in the southwest in Bristol per se. What's the kind of early stage ecosystem like? Kind of what support have you had, and what's been your experience been?
So it's growing, is what I would say. When we first started off, it was very different to what's there today. The Southwest was particularly known for, I guess, cybersecurity, software, that sort of area. And so building a life science business, it was still the very nascent stages of, the ecosystem. The University of Bristol was probably what the main sort of backers of early ideas. And of course, you had, a few lab spaces around. Science Creates came along, and that was quite helpful to create lab space for companies to actually grow into. But now I could see the ecosystem actually developing a lot more. You've got special groups forming, Tech Southwest, for example, to really bring innovators together. And of course, this summer we had the launch of the Southwest Investment Fund, which is the first time that the Southwest has actually had a dedicated sort of fund to support the ecosystem. So I think now it's a really exciting time to be in the Southwest, because there's a lot of optimism, there's a lot of support for high growth businesses, and I would say generally our support has come through some the usual suspects, the universities, the early stage funders, and the angel groups as well. So that's been expanding in the region.
It has, and it's great kind of from the outside seeing the vibrancy of a city like Bristol, and as you said, probably over the last 5 years that's grown since you started out as well, and you can see those dots being joined up and different kind of entities coming together, which is great. Has in terms of the team, etc., you've got, how many members of your team are there now, and kind of if you are if you like an outsider, should we say, as a life sciences company, kind of has been kind of getting the right people, and has that been a challenge, or has that been is relatively straightforward?
Yeah, so it has been a challenge. So generally what happened is that the best life science minds used to be poached to Oxford, London, Cambridge. But now one of the good things Bristol has going for it is it's quite a sticky city. So if you've studied there, you're more likely to settle there. So people are reluctant to move if they could find good sort of good opportunities locally. So we've benefited from that tremendously. We're just shy of 10 full-time people, and probably about another 5 part-time. And we've managed to bring in microbiology expertise into the business, data science, chemistry, and it's a range of skills, including clinical. So our team is actually distributed. Most of us are in Bristol, but we do have people in Cambridge, as you do.
I was going to say, you can't criticize that too much then.
So, we are somewhat distributed, and like any other modern company, we do have people working remotely, but the talent pool is certainly, Bristol has certainly delivered, especially with the changes in the ecosystem. You find more graduates being keen to be involved, and we've gotten quite a few good candidates through internship schemes, for example, and PhD in placement opportunities. This has been quite beneficial to us.
Although I'm not sure Bristol are going to change their tagline to Bristol, the sticky city. I don't think that's going to catch on, but you never know. You never know.
It just might catch on if we say it enough.
Absolutely. And in terms of the clinicians you've been working with, etc., are they predominantly UK based? Are they, or are you working overseas, or kind of where are you on that kind of side of things?
Mostly UK, and that's strategic for us. Yep. Our focus initially is the UK. We do have global. We do have a global network and global aspirations, but there's a real important step in getting the product right, which is where the UK clinicians really come in, and also being able to demonstrate that initial traction. So our clinicians are across the country, and we recently attended a trade show where we upped our number of engaged clinicians to north of 40. Brilliant. That we can lean on in the time of, when we're ready to test at the next phase, and when we're ready to deploy for sort of trials. We have built that network now.
Brilliant. And I guess that's critical because it gives you that validation, it gives you that support, and then gives you that base to go to.
Yeah, critical feedback. So we do have a chief medical officer, Kazra. He's based in Cambridge, and he's been quite good as the voice of the clinician, kind of steering us in terms of what the features need to be and what the key considerations for use need to be for our products as well.
That's it. I think that's for any early stage business, it's critical to make sure the product is actually right for the market, and making sure it's got that product market fit. So kind of, again, you talked about starting out 2017, and Deepbridge are one of your early funders, and you've also had angel investors, etc. But kind of what's that funding journey look like, and why Deepbridge, I guess?
Okay, so we've raised just over $2.5 million to date, and as you mentioned, Deepbridge has been one of our first funders. We've also had support from Bristol Private Equity Club, Surrey, Angel Investment Club, the Oxford. I always forget how the acronym, what it stands for, but I call them Onion. The Oxford Opportunity Investment Network, I think it's called. And other angel investors that we've met along the way, including those in the Southwest. So that journey has been, as I've mentioned, it has been challenging, but we've had a really supportive group of investors with us. Why Deepbridge? I think fundamentally what sold us was the understanding of the space. Yep. They knew the length of the journey that was ahead of us and the amount of capital that we needed. So it was quite beneficial to meet with Sabas and Ben, who I met back in 2018, actually, was when we first invested. And we've worked very closely since then, and providing support as and when needed has been quite a benefit to the relationship. And even as we look to commercialization, there have been strategic introductions as well that have come out of this relationship. So in terms of the important pieces, access to capital when we need it, but also added value in terms of being able to advise along the journey, understanding what realistic expectations to have, about how long it will take, how much it will cost, who would you need to involve, and when. And also being able to make intros to the right people at the right time.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's good. I have to say to all listeners, we never prep that question, so that's good. So thank you, Neciah. That's awesome. And in terms of, you talked about commercialization stage, etc. So kind of what are your next steps? What are the kind of the short and the medium term goals that you've got?
Okay, so for us, everything is focused on product launch at the moment. So wrapping up late stage development on our UTI test. So it's a 15-minute test that will identify the causative agent and the bacterial load, which are the two pieces needed to diagnose. Okay. We're expecting to push that through as soon as possible. So getting through the last bit of testing and also getting it regulated and onto the marketplace. And longer term goal is really focusing on that product market fit. So it'll be a series of different trials that we'll be running, basically to demonstrate value for money to the healthcare system. So that our goal really is about launching the product and making that first one a success. Beyond that, we've got a pipeline of other products that we're looking to launch as well, of our 2 platforms. And there's, as long as we get this one right, there's a really big opportunity out there.
Yeah. And I guess it's understanding those steps, isn't it? You get this first one right, work on that, perfect that, and then you can move on to the others. And it's step by step.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So obviously 5 years in, you've since you had that kind of that light bulb moment, if you like. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs in a similar situation? Particularly kind of med tech companies and kind of what you're doing.
The first piece I would say is spend a lot of time really understanding what the core problem is. The technology development really needs to be led by the customer need, and if you get that right, if you're able to crystallize, the customer need, then it'll be evident where you need to focus sort of the meager funds that you have as a startup, R&D wise. Second thing I would say is, persist.
Yep.
It takes longer. You'll always get, you'll get surprises along the way.
Yep.
But if you persist, the opportunity is yours for the taking. So I'd definitely say these 2 pieces are really important. And finally, be very focused on the right team and pulling the right people around you, because that really is the make or break of being able to achieve your goals, because you can't do it alone. So you really need to have the right sort of driven people around you to guide you through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's imperative. And I think every time on these podcasts we talk to founders, CEOs, etc. And I think that's one of the messages that always comes out is the importance of making sure you've got the right people doing the right jobs, and that's critical as you grow and you go forward. Okay, so Neciah, you're a busy man. You've got a startup. You're growing rapidly. I know most of your time is spent on that, etc. You've got a young family, but away from work and managing the company, kind of what are your personal interests? In these podcasts, we like to bring to life the people behind the companies as well. Yeah. So, kind of who is Neciah? What do you enjoy doing?
To be honest, outside of that, I probably spend most of my time involved with my local church. So actually on the weekend, we had gone to an elderly home to sing, of all things. I can't sing very well, but...
Do you stand at the back then? Is that...
I will make a joyful noise. Yeah. And besides that, it's, family, as you said. I've got a young family, 2 kids. I spend as much time with them as I can, outside of work.
Excellent. Good. No, very good. And then the question we ask all of our guests on the Deepbridge Discovery Podcast, the question that all of our guests absolutely despise and hate me for when I send it over. But if you could invite 3 guests to the Deepbridge dinner party, dead or alive, but no friends or family, so we don't want to upset anybody, but who would those 3 people be and why?
I would have loved to meet Maxwell.
Okay.
I was obsessed with math.
Yeah.
And those equations dominate electrical engineering.
Yeah.
And I'd love to sit down and figure out what was he thinking.
How did he get there? That kind of thing.
How did we get there? As a Christian, I would have loved to have met Jesus, although I think I may have been in the crowd throwing stones.
Right. Okay.
I'd love to have met him. I think those 2. I don't know about a third one, actually, Andrew, because the third one I'm thinking of might upset a few people, so I'm probably going to keep that one to myself.
Okay, you do that. That's absolutely fine. But no, we don't want any complaints, so that's good.
Yeah.
But no, look, Neciah, thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed speaking to you and really good catching up with you. And I hope to catch up with you again on a future podcast and hear how you're getting along. So really thank you for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Andrew. All the best to you.
Thank you for joining us. If you have any topics you'd like covering in future podcasts, please email us at discovery@deepbridgecapital.com. This podcast was brought to you by Deepbridge Capital LLP. Deepbridge is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Please note that investments discussed are both illiquid and high risk and won't be suitable for all investors and should be considered as part of a diversified portfolio. The content of this podcast should not be construed as financial or taxation advice. We recommend investors seek appropriate professional financial advice. Any views expressed may no longer be current and may have already been acted upon.